In the year 1274, the Mongolian Empire, right after conquering most of Asia, turned its sights on Japan to conquer it. Their first stop, Tsushima Island. But to conquer such a large island, they need to face Kuchi Jinzaburo and a group of exiles, who were sent there by the Kamakura shogunate at the request of the princess of Tsushima, Teruhi. During the few years they get to stay there, Kuchi and his soldiers take their impossible chances at defeating the Mongolian army and stopping them from taking control of Tsushima. As we dive into the experiences Kuchi and his pals have during their campaign, we urge you to sit back, grab a drink, and enjoy the recap. In the first scene, a lone warrior, suspected to be Kuchi Jinzaburo, walks on a battlefield filled with the bodies of his fellow warriors to get to the enemy side. When he stops, he questions his life's decisions as the enemy army fires thousands of arrows in his direction. Realizing this is the end for him, Kuchi lets out a huge scream and gets hit by many arrows, ending his life. A few days before the battle that ends Kuchi's life, former retainer of the Kamakura shogunate, Kuchi Jinzaburo, and his fellow exiles from the Kamakura province sail as prisoners on a Kamakura ship in a heavy storm. As the ship sways left and right due to the raging waves, the exiles beg the captain of the ship to at least release them from their handcuffs so they do not roll overboard in the storm. When the captain gets hesitant, one of them assures him that they have nowhere to run to amid the storm, so he can rest assured that he is safe. Realizing they are right, the captain takes his chances and releases the bozos from their handcuffs. As soon as the exiles are free, one of them, an unruly bastard, attacks some of the crew members, throws them overboard, and then encourages his fellow exiles to do the same. With nothing left to lose, a few others join the unruly bastard, and together, they not only throw the captain and the rest of the crew overboard, but also throw some of their fellow exiles to lighten the ship and stay afloat. At one point, one of the bozos approaches a dwarf merchant who happens to be close to Kuchi, lifts him, and gets ready to throw him overboard. Thankfully, before Bro can do that, Kuchi slips his hand out of his restraints, steals the bozo's sword, stabs the guy holding the merchant, and throws him overboard. Seeing this, a few others run after Kuchi to attack him, but Kuchi single-handedly kills them all. Shortly after taking care of the disgruntled fellows, Kuchi faces some of the helmsmen left alive, and tells them to get to work if they want to live. While they all rush to do their jobs, one of the pirates Kuchi used to hunt back when he was still a war general, Onitakemaru, or Kemaru for short, speaks up and acts very friendly to Kuchi, hoping that will make Kuchi cut him out of his restraints. Soon enough, Kuchi, pretending not to recognize the fool, cuts him out of his restraints and tells him to just focus on getting them to the island first before catching up on old times. In time, the pirate Kemaru, now free, picks up the ship's mast and raises it to increase the ship's speed, ignoring the warnings of the helmsman. By sunrise the next day, the exile ship finally makes it to Tsushima Island. Kemaru, Kuchi, and a few others all get to see a great white shark as they admire the beautiful view of Tsushima Island. Very soon, the daughter of the ruler of Tsushima, Princess Su Teruhi, rides on a sailboat to officially welcome their newest batch of exiles to the beautiful city of Tsushima, while she utters sweet words to the men, also showcasing her beautiful body. Teruhi assures the tired exiles from Kamakura that they have already prepared a banquet for them to eat and fill their bellies, so they can feel relaxed on the island. Kuchi, on the other hand, senses something fishy about Tsushima's hospitality, but for now, Kemaru advises they rest there for a few days, since they have nowhere else to go, and Kuchi follows the suggestion. By nightfall, while the exiles eat as much as they can, the merchant Kuchi, saved earlier, Chumin Puku, or Puku for short, complains about his little stomach being too full of food. But Kuchi advises the old man to eat as much as he can, even if he doesn't want to, as there's no telling when they might get food again. Shortly afterward, Teruhi and her entourage show up to greet the exiles one more time. This time, however, Kuchi asks her to get straight to the point. Teruhi, upon recognizing Kuchi, asks him why he is so stern with her. In response, Kuchi names all the things they have done for them since they arrived, before telling her to tell them what they want in return. Well, since she can't hide anymore, Teruhi tells Kuchi and the rest of the exiles that Tsushima needs them to fight with the Mongolian army, with all their strength for the sake of the island. Hearing this, the exiles gasp in surprise, but Kuchi, who expected this, asks for more information. Teruhi tells him that a vast army of the Mukuri is invading the land of the rising sun. For all she knows, the Gappo Inlet in Goryo is covered with thousands of warships, and their first target is going to be Tsushima. Having heard this, Kuchi asks if that is why Tsushima requested a group of exiles to be sent there, just to fight to the death. Teruhi, feeling proud of herself, tells Kuchi, who laughs hysterically, that since they were to be put to death initially, Tsushima still sort of saved their lives. By this time, one of the exiles gets up to attack Teruhi, but before he gets close, the assassins roaming the place stick arrows into him and send the rest of the exiles to prison. About an hour later, Puku asks Kuchi if he is going to stand and fight with the Tsushima army. Kuchi, while chomping on a wing bone, tells him he is not sure yet, as he already saw this coming. Also, seeing as they are all national criminals, they sort of have no choice now but to help these people out. Moments later, Teruhi returns to her quarters, far from the prison, and collapses from exhaustion as soon as she enters her room. Otaki, her attendant, holds her up and praises her for enduring all that nonsense from the day. Teruhi, tired of all the murder talks, tells Otaki that she is sick and tired of thinking about what's to come. To help calm her down, Otaki urges her to soak herself in the warm bath she prepared earlier, and Teruhi proceeds to do just that. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, the other exiles resting in the same cell as Kuchi and Kimaru talk about the land of Tsushima, hoping any one of them knows a few things about the place. However, when nobody says a word, they ask the old man, Puku, if he knows anything about the land, and he replies that he once owned a map of Japan. For a few minutes, he explains the layout of their nation, just as he remembers it, and tells everyone that Tsushima is the first main settlement the Mongolians will attack should they plan to enter Japan. Once they understand the kind of danger they are in, they marvel at how scary it is to die in a country they know nothing about. As for Kuchi, he keeps thinking about his terrible luck of always running into war wherever he goes. While he recalls a memory from his past, a group of Mongolian assassins sneaks through Tsushima's woods to get to the settlement. In the meantime, Teruhi, now taking her bath gently, takes her time to think about the fate awaiting Tsushima, and hopes the Mukuri do not end up conquering the nation she knows and loves. Once she is done bathing, she has Otaki comb her hair and continues thinking about how pathetic she is for always running away during adversity. In time, Teruhi goes to sleep. But before long, the assassins attack her quarters, kill Otaki, and abduct her. Very soon, the alarm is sounded, and the guards guarding the prison run to help recapture the princess. Once they are gone, Kemeru destroys the wooden prison and suggests they all use this chance to steal a fisherman's boat and escape into the woods. Knowing the plan won't work, Kuchi warns them against it and explains how bad things will get for them if they escape now. Kimaru, on the other hand, tells Kuchi he just wants to fight, and Kuchi pretends that he is not right. In any case, 3 of the exiles split from the main group to live in the mountains, but Kuchi stays behind and decides to burn some houses to the ground, just for fun. Elsewhere, Kaitani, Teruhi's servant, spots Teruhi up ahead, bound and held captive by the abductors. Ignoring the burning buildings, the servant and a few soldiers approach the abductors. Before they get there, the abductors hold Teruhi close, so the soldiers will not shoot her, and Teruhi notices they are speaking in a foreign language. As soon as the abductors are surrounded, the fighting begins, and the abductors kill off some Tsushima soldiers. Very soon, Kemeru knocks Teruhi off one of the bandits' hands, and Kuchi, armed with a sword, takes out a few of the small fries. While he takes them down, Puku tells the others, who are amazed by Kuchi's fighting style, that he uses Gikei, a fighting technique created by a great general, Genkuru Yoshitsune. Shortly after defeating all the small fries, Kuchi faces the ringleader of the group and pauses before charging at the masked man. Soon, they clash swords for the first time, and the ringleader, impressed by Kuchi's technique, removes his eye guard and asks Kuchi if he also uses the Gikei style. Ignoring his question, Kuchi keeps fighting, and they go at each other's throats until the ringleader returns to his ship and escapes. Shortly after the battle, Kimaru and the other exiles show up to back Kuchi up, not knowing they are being watched by 3 weird men. Very early the next morning, Teruhi visits Otaki and the bodies of those killed in the attack, pays her respects, and begs her servant to give them a proper burial. Around this time, Kuchi shows up and helps Teruhi understand that war is not a thing to fear. Notwithstanding, he pays his respects to the dead, and then asks Teruhi if she has the stomach to be the person they all want her to be. In response, Teruhi steels herself and asks Kuchi to help her win the war that is coming, in exchange for a reward. Some minutes later, one of their scouts, Kano, rushes toward Teruhi and tells everyone there that 900 Mongolian warships are on their way toward Tsushima. A few hours later, Kuchi recalls the same memory from his past, about a little girl being forced to protect her favorite persimmon tree by her father, who wanted to cut it down. While he's at it, he wishes Teruhi hadn't made him remember such an awful moment. However, when he's done remembering, a messenger arrives at the prison and informs Kuchi that Teruhi has demanded he participate in the strategy conference being held at the Lord's mansion. Unable to refuse, Kuchi leaves immediately for the mansion. When he arrives, the ruler of Tsushima Island, Susuke-kuni, narrates the tales of his former victories against past enemies, all to complement the picture scroll that also illustrates his stories. Kuchi, who is listening for now, gets disappointed at the ruler for taking the Mongolian invasion lightly when he should be preparing for war. Seconds later, Su calls Kuchi over and asks him about some sport that those from Kamakura often play. As soon as that conversation ends, Sukekuni's adopted son, Abiru Yajiru, speaks up and confronts his father for allowing a prisoner in persimmons-colored clothes to attend the sacred meeting. Just before Sukekuni can reply, Teruhi appears and tells Abiru that she convinced her father to bring Kuchi, who has agreed to fight for Tsushima, into the meeting. Her father, upon welcoming her, tells her to take a seat so they can proceed with the war discussions. Once Teruhi sits, Sukekuni stops the stories and tells his officers that since they haven't spotted the Mongol Navy, which reportedly left Gappo Bay 2 days ago, they can relax, as Tsushima is likely safe. After pulling up a map, the foolish ruler continues, explaining that he believes the Mongol army will avoid attacking Tsushima on their way to the mainland, since their army also includes many soldiers from their homeland of Goryeo. According to Sukekuni's oldest son, So Umajiru, one of his Mongolian contacts assured him that the Mongol army would never attack their ancient allies, Tsushima, so there is no need to worry. Upon hearing more nonsense from other officers, Kuchi, who is tired of their naivety, gets up and tells everyone that the Mongol army he knows will never pass an enemy base without taking food and supplies to survive the invasion. Knowing they are not the type to ask nicely, he is almost certain the Mukuri will attack Tsushima, and they should prepare. Around this time, Abiru confronts Kuchi and tries to shut him up, but Kuchi keeps speaking about how their ancient alliances mean nothing, until he is finally thrown out of the conference for speaking out of place. As the meeting continues without him, Kuchi, who realizes he was out of line, walks to the Tsushima market. There, he sits in the middle of the road and studies the landscape until a random boy bumps into him, dropping all the mushrooms he has been gathering since dark. Kuchi apologizes instantly, but based on what the boy tells him, it seems the island is bigger than he initially thought. To understand the island's size, Kuchi works with the boy and other passers-by until he creates an accurate map of the island, using nothing but sticks and sand. Once the map is complete, the passers-by admire Kuchi's attention to detail, but Kuchi himself marvels over how large and expansive Tsushima really is. While lost in thought, a woman suddenly asks where everyone plans to run once the Mukuri come. By now, the entire crowd falls into depression, as many cannot even imagine what the next few days will bring. Soon after, another nobleman joins the crowd and tells his men to transfer the map Kuchi created onto paper. After giving the order, he removes his hat and reunites with Kuchi, who instantly recognizes him from Komachi Street in Kamakura 2 years ago. Once they exchange greetings, Kuchi asks the man why he keeps bothering him, and the man, identified as Shoni Kagesuke, reminds Kuchi that they used to fight in the same army. While Kuchi is now exiled, Kagesuke apparently rose to become a high general and is currently commanding the shogunate's armies in Kyushu. In response to Kuchi's question, Kagesuke says he initially came to learn about the Mongols, but now that he is here, he has decided to provide reinforcements by sending 0 soldiers to Tsushima in 7 days. Breaking down the plan, Kagesuke explains that he will return to Hakata in 1 day, prepare the army in 5 days, and get back to Tsushima with his men in just 1 more day. After explaining that, he gives Kuchi his favorite blade, the Minamoto no Yoshitsune, and asks if he can keep the island safe from the Mongols for just 7 days. Kuchi, after accepting the sword, tells Kagesuke to have his men ready in 4 days, as it might take 2 days to return to Tsushima with such a large force. With that settled, he tells Kagesuke to meet him in 7 days and not mess up. Teruhi, who suspects Kuchi of trying to flee the island using the monk's ship, holds him at knife point and demands to know if he is planning to abandon them. Kagesuke, after assuring her that Kuchi is only escorting him, leaves quietly, talking about Kuchi's experience on the island. Meanwhile, Kuchi begins to worry about depending on something he cannot control, but then Teruhi, knowing she can't let Kuchi leave now, puts on an act and pretends to be in love with him, begging him to stay. Embarrassed by the act, Kuchi promises not to leave, and Teruhi, satisfied, smirks at her cleverness. Some hours later, as Sukekuni examines the picture scroll from his past battles, Abiru rushes in to report that the Mongol navy has landed in Sasu Bay. Upon hearing this, Sukekuni stays calm and rings the town's bell to alert all Tsushima citizens that the Mongol army has arrived on their shores. As for Kuchi, he stares out at the ocean, trying to figure out how to keep the island standing for the next 7 days. By twilight, the entire island begins evacuating civilians to the mountains to avoid casualties in case of war. As the evacuation proceeds, one of the exiles asks Kuchi if he truly believes Kagesuke will return with reinforcements. Kuchi admits he is not certain, as Kagesuke's words are not always reliable. Just then, the island lord arrives and tells those asking that they still don't know if the Mongols intend to go to war, as they might simply be stopping by for supplies. While Kuchi considers the possible outcomes, Teruhi approaches her father, dressed in armor, and asks to join his army and fight. In response, Sukekuni slaps her and reminds her of her place and bloodline. Around this time, Kuchi begins to suspect that Teruhi might not be Sukekuni's biological daughter. Teruhi tells Sukekuni that her bloodline does not matter to her, as she wants to be his daughter no matter what. Sukekuni then softens, caresses her cheek, and assures her that he will easily defeat Mukuri, so she should not worry. With that, he sends a final message to those evacuating and rides to Sasu Bay with his eldest son, who tells Teruhi to wait for good news. Before they get too far, Kuchi sneaks away from the evacuation group and secretly follows the army to Sasu Bay, remaining hidden for hours. As he approaches the bay the next day, he feels the sharp ocean breeze and hears the distant rumble of the Mongol army. Soon after, Sukekuni and his troops spot the Mongol vanguard at the base of Mount Ukuma and decide to fight in the plains ahead. Hearing this, Kuchi tells them their plan is decent, but reminds them they will be facing 0 soldiers and need to be cautious. He offers to help, but Sukekuni refuses, saying they don't need help from an outsider. He also reminds Kuchi of the shame he brought him during the strategy meeting. Although Sukekuni considered killing him, he admits that Kuchi made him realize he is satisfied with his past battles. After some final words, Sukekuni orders Kuchi to go to the rear and protect Teruhi. If he does that, Sukekuni promises to give him a relic from a century ago. With that, he rips the picture scroll of his past glory and tells his men that this will be the greatest battle of their lives. After his speech, Sukekuni and his army charge down the plains, starting the battle by launching arrows at the enemy. The Mongol archers respond by releasing hundreds of arrows, killing many of Sukekuni's men. Kuchi, observing their tactics, realizes the Mongol soldiers must be from different regions, yet they coordinate incredibly well. As arrows continue to fly, Sukekuni orders his men to get closer. Once within range, Sukekuni and his troops charge at the Mongol foot soldiers, cutting down as many as they can. Soon, Sukekuni and his eldest son rush toward the bay to push the enemy back into the sea. Kuchi, admiring their strategy, grows worried, as Tsushima only had an advantage on the plains. When they reach the shore, they find piles of dead Tsushima citizens and freeze. Before they can react, Mongol ships fire dozens of explosive cannonballs at them, forcing forcing a retreat. As Tsushima falls back, Mongol soldiers pursue and kill Umajiru. Enraged by his son's death, Sukekuni slays the man responsible but is quickly surrounded by dozens of Mongol warriors. In time, they stab Sukekuni to death and raise his body for all Tsushima soldiers to see. With no time to waste, the remaining Tsushima soldiers are retreating further into the woods to regroup with the rest of their troops, unsure of what to expect in the coming hours, especially now that they have lost their lord and his son. Somewhere along the way, the soldiers stop when they spot a man with a scar on his face, wearing ancient armor revered by their former lord. Before explaining his plan, Kuchi, the scar-faced man in the ancient armor, calms the scared horses and shoots down some of the Mongolian soldiers pursuing them. Then, he turns to the frightened soldiers and tells them to charge at the Mongolian troops, who have overstretched their lines, and kill them all since they are separated from their base at the shore. At first, the soldiers reject Kuchi's idea due to his status as a barbaric exile, but soon enough, Kuchi convinces many of them to fight by helping them see just how vulnerable the enemy formation is. Even so, several soldiers remain hesitant. Seeing this, Kuchi calls out his fellow exiles hiding in the bushes to finish suiting up and gather the horses so they can ride off to fight. Around that same moment, Kemeru and a handful of exiles appear from a nearby bush, wearing the armor of fallen soldiers, claiming to be the very troops the frightened ones had begged to save them. When Kuchi promises they will not lose like Sukekuni did, one of the soldiers gets upset, but Kuchi continues his passionate speech until he shakes the cowardice out of the group. Once he has most of their attention, he urges them to follow him to battle. He rides out, and the other exiles follow. In response, the hesitant soldiers finally muster the courage to ride with their new general toward the enemy. Along the way, Shiraishi, one of the exiles, praises Kuchi for inspiring the soldiers, but Kuchi reminds him to make sure those who followed them stay alive. With the motivation in place, Kuchi breaks a hole in the enemy defenses by killing several Mongolian soldiers, tearing through their ranks like a wild beast. Witnessing Kuchi's fury, one of the Tsushima generals, Obusuma Saburo, is both shocked and motivated. He starts fighting harder, attempting to match Kuchi's intensity. Within minutes, the once hesitant Tsushima soldiers begin killing so many Mongolian vanguards that the enemy is forced to temporarily retreat to their base at Sasu Bay. As soon as Kuchi notices the retreat, he discusses the next step with Shiraishi, who suggests they pull back. But Kuchi, driven by the momentum of the battle, decides to push forward. He orders his troops ahead and pierces through the remaining enemy line. Not far away, one of the warriors urges Abiru to take command as the new lord instead of letting an exile lead. He asks if it is wise to follow Kuchi's plan. Reflecting on their earlier mistakes that led to Sukekuni and Umajuru's deaths, Abiru sits down, defeated, and tells Genpachi, the soldier speaking to him, that it no longer matters, the outcome will be the same. Just then, someone rushes in with news that Teruhi has arrived at the front lines. Abiru, hearing this, hurries to her, scolds her for being restless, and urges her to return to the capital as per her father's orders. In response, Teruhi says she has heard all that happened on the battlefield from the soldiers, and, as a samurai's daughter, she is prepared to fight using a bow. Again, Abiru instructs Gontaru, her escort, to take her back to the capital, but Teruhi refuses and instead assumes command in her father's absence. Soon after, someone reports that Kuchi and the remaining Tsushima soldiers have disappeared into the enemy vanguard. While Genpachi and others fear the worst, Teruhi remains hopeful. Moments later, Kuchi is seen on the battlefield, risking everything as he charges fearlessly through clusters of enemy soldiers, killing many and striking down the enemy general while surrounded. As the battle continues, warriors sent by the emperor observe from a distance to make their report. By twilight, the battle ends in victory for Kuchi. Teruhi and the others hiding in the woods see Kuchi and his group return to base, laughing and unfazed. When they reunite with the others, the soldiers who joined Kuchi tell tales of his bravery, how he cut through the enemy and killed their general like slicing through butter. The exiles, though not officially recognized, are being hailed for winning the battle on their own. When the excitement dies down, Kuchi approaches Teruhi and asks her to identify the owners of the heads he is about to show her. He opens a box, revealing the heads of Sukekuni and Umajuro. Teruhi faints upon recognizing them. Kuchi explains that he had to recover the heads to prevent them from being displayed by the enemy, which would have crushed the troops' morale. The remaining Tsushima soldiers kneel, paying their respects to their fallen lord and his son. Genpachi remarks that they died for the pride of the clan, but Kuchi corrects him, saying Sukekuni simply fought with all his strength and died after failing. There was no pride in it, just duty and loss. When Teruhi regains consciousness, she wails for her father and brother and arranges for a proper burial that night. As Tsushima observes the rites, Amushi, one of the exile scouts, returns with news of the enemy base's location and shares it with Kuchi. During the funeral, Abiru tells his men to prepare to return to the capital when the time comes. When he asks about the exiles, he is told they are resting in a nearby cave. A few clicks away, inside the cave, Kuchi and Shiraishi ask Kimaru why he did not join the earlier fight. Kimaru casually says it was because they left him behind while he was using the bathroom. Regardless, Kuchi points out the cave's strategic advantage as a hiding spot. Shiraishi remains skeptical, saying the Mongols will surely find them by morning. As they sit, Shiraishi talks about his 2 wives and 7 children back in Kyushu, and asks Kuchi about his own family. Kuchi says he has had 4 wives, but only one stayed with him, along with their daughter, both of whom died in a plague 4 years ago while he was away fighting. Unbeknownst to him, Teruhi overhears his story. When her people arrive with supplies, she She enters the cave, introduces herself as the daughter of their former lord, and offers dried rice. Once the formalities are over, she urges the villagers to follow her to the capital, saying the valley is no longer safe. Before anyone can decide, Kuchi gets up and tells Teruhi to wake him once the moon is high. Irritated by his attitude, Teruhi asks why he is going to sleep when they need to act. Kuchi says they will raid the enemy base at night. He asks one of the villagers to guide them. Teruhi argues that the people are tired and should return to the capital to plan properly, but Kuchi ignores her and calls for anyone willing to join the fight. Just then, Ginshichi, a Tsushima man, says the enemy captured his wife and children, and he decides to join. Two others follow, and Kuchi tells them to eat before heading out. Meanwhile, Yajiru, disillusioned by all the death, flees to the capital. Teruhi, drawn by Kuchi's boldness, stays by his side while he sleeps, admiring how calm and composed he is even in war. She briefly considers killing him in his sleep, regretting her decision to summon him, but after watching his face, she decides to wait. When he wakes, Kuchi confirms the moon is at its peak. He suits up in light armor, gathers the remaining 64 soldiers, not counting Abiru and those who defected, and writes down the names of everyone joining the raid to remember them. He also notes down the names of their guides Ginshichi and his two friends. As they prepare to move, Teruhi appears and decides to join them. This time, Kuchi allows her. He makes sure their scout, Amushi, gives all the needed information about the enemy camp. Satisfied, Kuchi leads the group toward the enemy. He tells them the plan is to set the camp on fire, create a distraction, and escape. This ambush will protect them later and slow the enemy's advance, buying time. Since the Mongols are after Kyushu, they will not want to spend months on Tsushima. After the raid, they will hide deep in the mountains until the enemy moves on. After walking for a while, they reach the enemy camp, but with only 200 steps left, they assess the situation, silently take out the nearest watchman, and prepare to strike. Just then, Ginshichi's two friends betray them and make some noise, waking the camp. Ginshichi, torn by memories of his family, attempts to kill Kuchi, but Teruhi steps in and gets struck in the shoulder. Right after watching Ginshichi strike Teruhi, Kuchi strikes him, asking if the enemy soldiers took his wife and children hostage, and Ginshichi mentions the name of his kid, Sasamaru, just right before he dies. Upon losing a good soldier, Kuchi picks up Ginshichi's swords, mutters a few things, and soon gets alerted by the Mongolians, who shoot fire arrows into the woods to smoke Kuchi and his small army out. With Teruhi losing lots of blood each minute, Kuchi ultimately decides to get Teruhi out of the woods while he and the men decide on their next course of action. Now that the Mongolians are awake, Kuchi and his men discuss a few things about their next course of action. Upon hearing someone joke about hauling the Mongolians' arse, Kuchi shows them all the bodies of Tsushima citizens they've killed so far, which are also in the woods they're hiding at, and tells them to attack the bastards together with him. With newfound anger and disdain for the Mongolians, Kuchi and his soldiers rush out of their hiding spots and quickly kill off some of the Mongolians up front. Very quickly, the enemy soldiers form a defensive wall that gives them the advantage for a little while. As soon as Kemeru gets in his zone, he charges at the enemy and destroys their defensive wall in no time, giving Kuchi and the others access to the deeper parts of the camp. Once inside, Kuchi splits up the group and sets fire to all the tents they can find, all while killing as many soldiers as they can while they can. Soon after, one of the Mongolian soldiers run into their army commander's tent at the rear of the camp and informs him of the raid. When the commander asks him for the enemy numbers, the man fumbles, and the general, Kin Huke, talks down on the guy for being a fool. Soon enough, the man uses his ears to figure out the enemy count, and realizes seconds later that the enemy leader must be the man who killed his son, the Minghan commander, that afternoon. Just then, another high-ranking official, the second marshal in command of the Mongol armies, Ryu Fukuku, plays his violin and then asks Huke, when he's done, about the song he's playing, and Huke, recognizing his presence, pays his respects. While Ryu takes his seat, Huke asks the man why he's there, and Ryu, noticing the fear on Huke's face, assures him that the marshal doesn't know he's there. In any case, he's there to find out more about the wolf he's heard about on the island, but Huke knows there's nothing good about that. In the meantime, Kuchi and his men finish burning down all the enemy tents, and leave shortly after to avoid getting hunted down and killed by the reinforcements. Before they leave, however, they hear screams down by the dock, and soon spot a bunch of Mongols taking some Tsushima citizens captive. With no time to waste, someone suggests they go save their men and women, but then Kuchi, upon recalling Ginshichi's last words, tells his men to keep on moving so they don't get surrounded and slaughtered, as saving those people would be the same as entering a trap. While the man makes preparations to leave, Teruhi, while getting wheeled to a safe space, thinks about Kuchi and hopes whatever they were planning worked in due time. Just as Kuchi and the men are about to abandon the women and kids, a familiar sound plays nearby, and, soon enough, the Toyborai, aka Tsushima's allies, who also share the island with them, show up to save the captured men and women. Right after Kuchi is filled in on the history of the Toyborai, he and the others join them on the shore, help them take down the rest of the Mongolian soldiers, and then make their escape as quickly as possible with the captives. Shortly before he joins them, he chats a little with Shireishi, who praises him for carrying out such a speedy attack without them getting pursued, and then faces the commander of the Toyboraian army, Nagamine Hangen, for a brief discussion before they part ways. During their discussion, Hangen lets Kuchi know that they, as a separate nation, have no intentions to help Tsushima any further in the fight, and while Kuchi knows this, he does let them know that he knows he's in their debt for helping them this one time. In any case, Hangen tells Kuchi about the Emperor, but then lets him know that he needs to wash the blood off his body before meeting such an esteemed man. With all that said, Hangen ends the meeting and returns to Toyborai, hoping their Emperor is right about Kuchi being the man who'll bring them peace. Shortly after the raid on the Mongolian camp ends, Ryu goes out secretly to hunt the wolf who Kei told him about earlier, and soon bumps into Kemaru after taking down a few Tsushima soldiers. Initially, he asks Kemaru if he's the wolf he was told about, aka the leader of the Japanese. But then Kemaru acts unruly, and Ryu, knowing he's not that bright, realizes he's not the one he's looking for. Upon hearing other smart things Kemaru says about his rank, Ryu decides he's a worthy prey to hunt and instantly attacks Kemaru. Upon exchanging blows and clashes for a few seconds, Ryu quickly figures out just how strong Kemaru really is, and instantly decides to take him more seriously. Soon enough, he pins Kemaru to the ground, but just as he's about to end him, Kuchi appears out of nowhere and blocks Ryu's strike. Pissed off by Kuchi's interference, Ryu mistakes him for just another worm trying to play hero. But then, after fighting against Kuchi's Gikei style for a few more seconds, Ryu quickly realizes that Kuchi is the man he's searching for, the infamous leader of the Japanese army. With this new intel, he gets himself ready for a battle to the death, but just then, a sound is heard from the Mongolian ship, and Ryu gets summoned by the marshal to return to base. Thankfully, Kuchi and Kemaru escape death by a hair's breadth, but Ryu, right after abandoning his mission after promising to see him again, returns to the ship. Minutes before he gets to the ship, the Mongol army marshal, Hindun, asks his people if Ryu's returned, but they tell him he's not there yet. Hearing this, the man makes a few comments about Ryu and the island before asking the priest, who just finished a ritual, for the appropriate time to leave Tsushima. When the priest assures Hindun that 7 days is all they need to pass through the island, Hindun marvels at the news and urges his men to enjoy Tsushima in the meantime. The next morning, Kuchi and the rest of the villagers travel through the mountains to get to the capital and rest there till the Mongols leave their island. Somewhere along the way, Kuchi and Shiraishi stop to talk about a few things as well as assess their rear to make sure they're not being followed. A few minutes later, they get to the perfect resting place for the people, and there, Kuchi spots Teruhi sitting and recovering safe and sound. Upon reuniting with her people, poor Teruhi tears up, thanking her stars that they can finally go home, and then urges the men to eat some of the dansuke mochi that the Sasu villagers prepared for them. As the villagers munch on the delicious food, Kuchi spots some strong bamboo nearby and tells one random dude to gather everyone's katana, as well as a blacksmith, so he can help him make something with the bamboo fast. Meanwhile, Kano, their scout, and Gontaru, Teruhi's servant, talk about a memory they shared back when they were younger, all while Teruhi observes the morale of those remaining. Soon after, Kuchi, while chomping on some grass, moves closer to her and asks about her wound. Irritated, Teruhi lies about it being a scratch, but when he finds out it's more serious than that, he tells the busybodies around him that he's chewing sashimo grass, which is great for healing wounds, and then applies it to Teruhi's wound after opening her shoulder garment. With that done, Kuchi leaves Teruhi alone, blushing, and then walks out to cheer up the injured. As Teruhi tries to figure out what just happened, Jinta gets into a fight with Ginshichi's kid, Sasamaru, and claims that the kid of a betrayer shouldn't eat what they eat. Realizing what's happening, Kuchi finds out Sasamaru was saved amongst the hostages, but then, to stop the ruckus, he steps in, chases Jinta away, and encourages the crybaby, Sasamaru, to pick up a sword and get stronger, just so he can get avenge his father's death sometime in the future, all by killing him. In any case, Kuchi calls Ginshichi a brave man for fighting for his wife and kids, and this statement alone makes Sasamaru pick up the sword with determination to get much stronger and fight Kuchi sometime in the future. With that, they all get up and continue their journey to the capital. After traveling for another hour or so, they finally approach the capital on the horizon and joke about the things they'll do once they get there. Before they get there, however, Kuchi observes smoke in the skies and walks over to a cliff, alongside Teruhi, to check out what really happened there, only for them to see the entire capital in flames, as it appears the Mongol army got there before them and burned the place to the ground. Unable to bear the sight of her hometown getting burned to the ground, Teruhi freezes in her tracks and instantly falls to her knees when reality dawns on her Tsushima is done for. As for Kuchi, he stays calm, analyzes how many Mongolian ships and troops attacked the capital, which numbers about 1,000, and then turns to Shiraishi to ask if there are other places they can escape to before the Mongolians catch up to them. Before he finishes his sentence, however, he notices Shiraishi shedding tears for the fallen capital, and wonders if he is doing okay. Regaining his composure, Shiraishi explains he was once a ruler, and had a city he built from scratch taken from him, which is why he could not help but cry for the fallen capital. Soon after, Genpachi, Abiru, and a handful of other survivors appear from the nearby shrubs, spot Teruhi, and call her name to ensure she is safe. When she sees them, Teruhi feels some relief seeing them alive. Abiru, however, does not look so well, understandably so, having just witnessed his entire life come crashing down. A few moments after their arrival, Kuchi asks Abiru if they are the only survivors. Genpachi then speaks up, saying that although he does not know what happened to the others, he is sure some of them made it into the mountains. To explain what happened, another servant says they arrived at the capital after an all-night march earlier that morning, only to find the Mongols attacking the capital as expected from the start. Soon after, a tired Kemaru asks how long the Mongols plan to stay. Teruhi, worn out from all the fighting, tells them the Mongols will stay for weeks or months until they slay everyone. Hearing this, Abiru loses hope and rants like a fool until Kuchi interrupts and speaks sense into him. Angry, Abiru stands up and tries to fight Kuchi, but before anything escalates, someone rushes in to report that the Mongols are approaching. With no time to spare, Kuchi and the others hide in the bushes beside a narrow path and wait until they see about 5 Mongolian scouts passing through. While waiting, Kuchi studies their behavior and attire and realizes they are different from the last Mongolian scouts. Then, without warning, the scouts suddenly turn back as if they have discovered something. Before they get away, Teruhi, overwhelmed by all that was taken from her, screams out in rage, exposing their location, draws her bow, and quickly shoots down 2 scouts. To stop the remaining ones from escaping, Kuchi and the other archers shoot them down, sparing only 1 horse to return to the enemy base. After that, Kuchi finishes examining the scouts and confirms they are from a different country. As he and Shiraishi discuss the fleeing horse, Teruhi breaks down and apologizes to Kuchi for acting out earlier. Kuchi assures her that her actions did not change much, as the scout had already sensed something. Afterward, Kuchi notices the concerned expressions on the men's faces and listens to their suggestion to flee north to Sasu Bay, where there are supplies. While they finalize their plans, Amushi, Kuchi's scout, jokes with the men, but soon warns that they have no time to get to Sasu Bay because the Mongols are right behind them. At that same moment, the Mongol Mingan commander, Ryo and Ichika, leads his army through the treacherous mountain paths behind Kuchi and the others. To avoid being caught in a slaughter, Kuchi leads the civilians further north, while he, Abiru, and a few fighters remain hidden in the bushes to face the enemy. Turns out they plan to use the narrow road to slow the Mongols and give the civilians time to escape. Understanding the plan, Abiru jokes with the exiles, prompting Kimaru to expose Puku, the old man who apparently survived the capital attack and stole treasures during the chaos. Busted, Kimaru retrieves the treasure from him and waits for Kuchi's signal. Moments before the Mongols arrive, Kuchi reveals a new weapon he made using fresh bamboo and spears. He then tells Abiru that if he wants to repel the enemy, he must be ready to lay down his life. He also tells him they will build a fort on the mountainside. When Abiru asks how, Kuchi informs him it is already 80% complete. As the Mongols approach the narrow path, Kuchi reminds his people to follow the plan once he draws the enemy in. He then moves to a corner with a nervous Abiru and teases him to lighten the mood. When the Mongols reach the corner, they sense that the Tsushima soldiers are nearby and proceed with caution. Just before the Mongols appear, Kuchi gives a final speech to his soldiers, ensures Abiru is ready, and then charges at the heavy-set Mongolian warriors, cutting down a few. He clears the way for the others to continue the fight, allowing the archers to take out as many of the enemies as possible. Around this time, Amushi and another exile boy discuss the technique Kuchi is using, the Yokoyagake, also known as the side arrow attack, and Amushi leaves once they are satisfied. With the battle ongoing, all Tsushima soldiers, including Abiru, use every weapon they have to torment the Mongols, killing as many as possible to buy time for the innocent people to reach Sasu Bay. At one point, Abiru's doubts return. Kuchi notices and tells him not to hesitate during battle, saying he might as well run away if he cannot commit. Hearing this, Abiru steadies himself and asks Kuchi why he goes so far for such an insignificant island. To answer, Kuchi remembers a moment from Kamakura province on February 9th, a few years ago. On that day, he plays shogi with his family friend, an elderly man, and gets thoroughly beaten. When Kuchi remarks that war and shogi are different, the man replies that that is exactly what Kuchi's father once said. Surprised, Kuchi asks more questions, and the man, Nagoi Tokiyaki of the Hujo clan branch family, tells him he plays like his father. To spite his father, Kuchi says he barely remembers his face, and Nagoi chuckles. Soon after, Tokiyaki's adult son, Kimitoki, appears, comments on the shogi match, and is quickly cautioned by his father. After one more game, Kuchi prepares to leave, but Tokiyaki calls him back and warns him not to visit often. He knows Kuchi is trying to protect them from the shogun's aide, Tokimune, who is targeting their clan. Apparently, 30 years ago, the Hujo clan rebelled against Tokimune's clan, and now, Kuchi should avoid becoming involved in their clan conflict. Even when Kuchi protests, Tokiyaki shows him around and explains he is doing all he can to not give Tokimune a reason to go to war. While Kuchi respects this, he warns Tokiyaki not to abandon his sword, as it might be dangerous to do so in the future. On his way home, Kuchi runs into Ukura Yorisu, a Huju clan servant who also works with the shogun. He listens to the man rant about how terrible Tokiyaki must be at shogi. Despite Kuchi telling him he is awful at it, Ukura insists he come to his place later so he can teach him shogi and the art of war. Before leaving, Ukura calls Kuchi a pawn and leaves him suspicious about his motives. A few days later, Ukura invades Tokiyaki's household, slaughters his guards, and accuses Tokiyaki of plotting against Tokimune. Tokiyaki asks to speak with Tokimune to clear things up, but Ukura, knowing he cannot allow that, prepares to behead him. As he is about to strike, Kuchi arrives, kills some of Ukura's men, and challenges him for his lies. A fight breaks out, and Kuchi, alongside a few allies, takes down as many soldiers as possible until Kimitoki pleads with him to stop, fearing worse consequences in the capital. Distracted, Kuchi is struck by Ukura and falls. As he lies wounded, Ukura orders Tokiyaki's execution. With his final words, Tokiyaki tells Kuchi to always remember his face whenever he thinks of his father. His head is then cut off, and the memory ends. Back in the present, Kuchi responds to Abiru's earlier question by sharing another lesson about life and what he learned about battle in his youth. Once he is done inspiring Abiru, Mongol reinforcements arrive, launching explosives at the Tsushima soldiers and throwing them into chaos. As Kuchi and the others stagger from the blast, the Mongols kill those at the front. Realizing they cannot afford to lose now, Kuchi urges his men to rise and fight, telling them to avoid the explosives. Encouraged, Abiru and a few others get back up and surround the Mongol reinforcements, now trapped in the small ravine beneath their makeshift fort, and slaughter every last one of them like animals. With the first battle over, Abiru finds his courage again and promises Kuchi, his pillar, that he will protect his back from now on. In the meantime, Teruhi, Gontaro, Kano, and one other exile archer from Kuchi's team, who are on their way to complete a different mission, stop to investigate the deafening sound they just heard from Kuchi's battlefield, which is similar to the noise they heard at Sasu the previous day. With no time to lose, the exile archer urges them to get a move on so they do not miss their chance, and Teruhi, knowing he is right, gets a move on. As the second wave begins, Abiru and the rest of the Tsushima soldiers do their best to make sure the surviving Mongols do not climb their way out of the fort to attack the archers. Even when two Mongols almost get to the archers, Abiru impresses everyone, including Kuchi, by killing them quickly and causing Kuchi to playfully call him a general who is making his daddy proud. Not too far away from the battleground, the general of the Mongol army fighting Kuchi, Ede, discusses the way forward with his men, and ultimately decides to use their valuable Shintenrai to obliterate the rebel soldiers so their army can pass through the path. While an old soldier carries out the order, another one of Ede's most trusted soldiers, Karaun, assures him that even though the Shintenrai will work, he has another idea that should help them as well. While he voices his ideas to the general, the archer and Teruhi hide behind the bushes where Eddie stands and prepare themselves carefully to fire 2 arrows at the general to take him out. As he prepares his arrow, the archer mutters a few depressing words to Teruhi, but Teruhi, unable to act weak and back out now, steels herself, takes aim together with the archer, mutters a few inspiring words to herself, and fires the arrow in unison with the archer. Unfortunately, they are not able to take out Idia as one of his men takes the hit for him. With their cover blown and their chance missed, Teruhi and the archer make preparations to retreat. However, before Teruhi completely disappears, Edie spots her from his position and instantly falls in love with her beauty. Thereafter, he tells his men to do whatever they can to recover Princess Teruhi alive, as he feels that will be the best war prize they can get as an army. Back on the battlefield, Abiru and the others rest easy now that they have defeated the Mongols in their pit. But then, Kuchi, upon seeing the other force heading into the valley, tells Abiru and the others not to relax just yet, as he is sure those bozos are going along the river to strike them from behind. Knowing that, he advises they retreat, but just as Abiru gives the order to retreat, garnering much praise and commendation from Kuchi and the other Tsushima fighters as well, he spots a small band of Mongols approaching them with explosives and decides to take them all out himself. As soon as the Mongols stop, one of them takes out a hollow tube, gets on his knees while pointing the tube at the clueless Abiru, lights the other end, and fires an explosive cannonball at Abiru's stomach once the fuse burns up. In no time, Abiru gets hit by the explosive ball before he can blink and collapses instantly. Very soon after, he squirts blood from his mouth and screams in excruciating pain. Having seen the explosive power of the new barbarian weapon, also known as the gun, Ide discusses the weapon's history with his right-hand man, Karaun, and then warns Karon not to let the gun handlers get too comfortable with it. Around that same time, the gun handlers start getting far too comfortable in their position, and Kuchi, together with Shiraishi, both enraged, charge at all of them and slit their throats in a split second. Once they are done chasing off the enemy, they turn their sights to Abiru Yajiru, who is now sitting in a pool of his blood, gasping for air as he takes his final breaths of life. While his vision blurs to death's call, Abiru still stops to wonder what everything means in the end is death, the fate of Tsushima, as well as the battle of attrition they have been fighting ever since. Unable to get a response, Abiru leaves his will in Kuchi's hands and gives up his last breath right after Kuchi promises to avenge his death in due time. A few minutes later, Teruhi arrives on the narrow path, greets everyone there, and asks them about the thundering noise she just heard. Before telling her about Abiru's death, Kuchi asks to know if she killed the general, and as soon as she tells him what happened, he presents Abiru's head and urges her to give him a proper burial. Now used to death, Teruhi receives the head with pride and thanks Kuchi for helping her recover it while it is still warm, unlike that of her father's and Umajiru's, which were cold to the touch. Seconds later, Amushi shows up complaining about the pools of blood he is stepping on, and tells Kuchi that the Mongols from Sasu are closing in on them fast from the west. Upon hearing this, the men start to despair, as they feel they are getting pinned down, but then Kuchi, recognizing the silver lining in this, tells everyone that the Mongol armies approaching from the capital and those from Sasu are two different armies, meaning they are very likely to clash once they run into each other on the narrow mountain paths. Seeing as it is almost sunset, Kuchi advises they use the confusion that might ensue to survive their last night in the mountains. Almost instantly, Teruhi agrees with him, and Kuchi assures her that her decision will be worth it. With all that said, Teruhi gives the order for everyone to head to the northern mountains. While they pick up the pace, Kuchi starts cooking up something much more impressive, but still follows the men nonetheless to rest up. Shortly after they flee the path, Edia's scouts show up at the battlefield and continue the pursuit. However, after they run for a while, Kuchi and Teruhi bump into Kimaru, who apparently not only stole Puku's loot, but also threatened the fleeing farmers, collected all their stuff, and tied them up. At first, Teruhi and Kuchi do not understand why Kimaru would do such a thing, but when he explains that he plans to slow down the Mongols by exposing them to some guarded plunder so they can gnaw at it while they make their escape, they understand and let him have the playing field for now. With the eastern Mongols closing in, Kuchi and the others leave Kimaru and Puku to play chase for now. Once the fools arrive, Kimaru and Puku fool them into thinking they are really guarding some special Japanese treasures, after which they beat up some of them before running away to join the others. As soon as they are gone, the Mongols from Sasu Bay arrive at the same plunder site and prepare to get their hands on some Japanese treasure. Before they can do that, however, the Mongols from the capital claim the rights to the treasure and start an argument. Soon enough, things escalate, and a fight breaks out between both parties. In the meantime, while Edie observes silence for the deaths of his soldiers who died in the fort attack, he gets word that their vanguard is brawling with the Western Mongols for the Japanese treasures left behind by the fleeing exiles. Unable to let them just take the treasure, Ide orders his men to keep fighting until they get all the treasure for themselves only. With that said, the fight intensifies, and in due time, the Mongols fight each other over worthless things. By nightfall, Kuchi and the others get to the mountains and stop somewhere along the way to rest for the night. Right after giving her adopted brother, Abiru Yajiru, a proper burial, Teruhi adjusts her bow and approaches Kuchi, who is sleeping loudly like a decorated general. Unable to resist the former general in his vulnerable state, Teruhi gets dangerously close to the man, not realizing just how dark his dreams are at the time, and continues staring at him until his dreams force him awake. Apparently, poor Kuchi has been having nightmares of all the horrible things he has experienced on the island, but could not tell anyone, so their morale does not falter. When he does wake up, however, he asks Teruhi why she is so close to him, and she cooks up some excuse to get out of the situation without showing too much embarrassment. Soon after she is gone, Kuchi removes his armor, stares at it, and finally figures out why he has been so keen on winning this war. It is because he sees the current war as his burden to carry alone. Knowing this, he accepts it and continues taking in the night's wind. Teruhi, on the other hand, spots dozens of Akamato fireflies by the river after washing her face, and instantly concludes they must be the souls of everyone who died being reborn as fireflies. At this point, she gets a little sad for not becoming a firefly in time, but before the tears can come out, she spots an old man dressed strangely and asks him to identify himself. Soon after urging Teruhi to recognize him, the man asks after Kuchi Jinzaburo, and around that same time, Kuchi presents himself to the man, asking what he plans to do with him. In response, the man stares at Kuchi, assesses his strength, and then, after describing the vulgar look on his face, talks about Nagamine being right, and then tells Kuchi to follow him so he can take him to the palace. Before they leave though, the old man says something about Kuchi being unworthy to face the emperor and runs away. To catch up to him, Kuchi runs after the man all through the night in the woods until they get to a foggy place that Kuchi almost gets lost in, as he spots some priests doing rituals around the place. At sunrise, Kuchi finally climbs to the peak of Mount Shirataki and finds the old man telling him that they have arrived at the palace. When Kuchi asks what he is doing, the old man, as well as the others around him, bow down to respect the emperor's arrival, and soon enough, Tokihito, or the Emperor Antoku, shows up and introduces himself to Kuchi. However, before they discuss any further, we get to sneak a peek into the life of young Emperor Antoku during the 4th year of the Jue period. In that particular flashback, Minamoto no Kuro Yoshitsune, the High General of the Genji forces, led a Japanese task force to fight off Mongol soldiers, to save young Antoku from getting captured by the enemy fleet. After pushing back a few enemies, Yoshitsune boarded Antoku's ship and tried to convince him to return to the capital to reunite with his people. Unfortunately, young Antoku refused and instead gave him the short sword that Kuchi eventually receives from Kagasuke before leaving for Hakutate sword of Minamoto no Yoshitsune. Now, back in the present, Antoku rambles briefly about Eastern warriors, but quickly shifts his attention to the blade on Kuchi's belt. Recognizing the sheath, he tells Kuchi that he gave that same talisman katana to Yoshitsune, the fearless warrior who once came to save him, and that the sword now serves to protect Kuchi. Before Kuchi can respond, Teruhi finally reaches the summit and quickly pays her respects to the emperor. In response to her formal greeting, Antoku urges her to be more casual and just call him Grandpa, as they both know she is his great-granddaughter. He tells Kuchi about her earlier visit years ago and gets down on his knees to comfort her for all the pain she must have endured, watching everyone she ever loved die. After comforting her, Antoku hands Teruhi a gourd containing a personal letter addressed to Magistrate Nagamine. When she asks what the letter says, Antoku explains that it is a command from him to the leader of the Toyborai, instructing them to protect the people of Sasu Bay at all costs. As he gives her the letter, he speaks of the noble sacrifices made by those who died to protect him in the past, and urges her to keep their hopes alive by surviving. Teruhi promises to do just that and leaves the mountain, accompanied by Kuchi. On the way to the Toyborai settlement, Teruhi shares her family history with Kuchi, telling him that her father was given the emperor's granddaughter as a wife, which led to her birth. She confesses that although she once hated being born into nobility, even pretending not to know Antoku at times, she is now grateful for it, since she can use her bloodline to help not only her people but all of Tsushima. When they reach the other Tsushima survivors traveling to Toyborai, she informs them of the recent developments. However, the men begin complaining about losing their pride pride if they must ask the Toyborai people, who were never keen on taking orders from the Su clan before the war, for help. Tired of their whining, Teruhi silences them, telling them there is no time to think about pride. Not far away, Shiraishi, Kuchi, and the archer discuss the history of the Toyborai, who claim to be descendants of Japan's protectors. Puku, tired of their chatter, interrupts to explain that their ancestors were originally sent there centuries ago to protect Japan and its people. Hearing this, Shiraishi asks if Kuchi thinks the Toyborai will welcome them all. Kuchi responds that if he were in their shoes, he might not. Eventually, they reach Sasu Bay and stare out across the water. As the group continues talking, Kuchi describes the bay's countless inlets and notes that from the peak of Shiratake, it all looks like a maze. Around that time, Amushi calls the inlet a maze of piss, prompting a girl about his age, holding a cat, to insult him back. When he tries to get her name, she insults him again until an older woman appears and asks about Amushi's origins. Soon after, a small boat rowed by a group of girls appears from around a corner. Kuchi, noting their speed, quickly realizes they are being chased. Moments later, the pursuers are identified as Mongols, and Teruhi orders everyone to hide in the woods. Once concealed, one of the Tsushima survivors suggests staying out of trouble, but Teruhi insists they help the girls. She asks Kuchi to act quickly. Kuchi warns that if even one Mongol survives and reports back, their location will be compromised. Just as he begins outlining his plan, the same girl from earlier assures them that the girls will handle it. As the girls lure the Mongols upstream, they suddenly strip down and dive into the water. When the Mongols prepare to search, archers hiding nearby ambush them, killing as many as they can. The surviving Mongols retreat, only to be flanked by Nagamin's boat, which fires arrows at them. Left with no choice, the remaining enemies dive into the water, but the girls from earlier silently kill them, leaving no survivors. After the battle, Nagamin sails back to shore. Before Teruhi can explain the Imperial Order, Kuchi steps in and jokes around a bit. Eventually, Teruhi steps up and asks about the earlier Mongol attack. Nagamin confirms it was the second small group they've eliminated, so the enemy remains unaware of their presence. Nagamin voices concern about the Mongols pursuing Teruhi and her people, worried that it could endanger his own. Before he can send them away, Teruhi hands him the Emperor's divine words. He reads the letter, reflects on its meaning, and welcomes them into the camp. Later, the girl from earlier, revealed to be Sana, rejoins the female divers and jokes with them. Meanwhile, Kimaru and Shiraishi discuss the unusual presence of women divers. Nearby, the quiet bald exile, who also happens to be a skilled doctor, treats a Toyborai warrior wounded by a poisoned arrow. Kuchi examines the bodies of the fallen Mongols, brushing off Nagamin's rude remark about their worthlessness, and realizes that these enemies are different. Nagamin identifies them as Jurchen, or Toy, and warns that they are deadly archers. He then tells Teruhi he will escort her to their stronghold at Kanatanoki. After an hour of trekking uphill, they reach the castle gates and pause to admire their beauty. When Kuchi asks if they built the wall themselves, Nagamin says their ancestors built it 600 years ago, and that they've been fighting the Mongols on the island ever since, unlike the oblivious mainlanders. With that said, Nagamin surrounds Kuchi and the others with guards, informing them they will now follow the Toyborai people's orders, even if treated as guests. Kuchi has no choice but to comply. Soon, Amushi climbs the castle wall, ignoring guards' warnings, and gazes at the landscape. Sana appears again, insults him, and challenges him to a race around the circular wall. The first to catch the other wins, and Amushi eagerly accepts. Meanwhile, Kuchi, walking deeper into the castle with Nagamin, spots some familiar survivors. Nagamin explains that their villages were destroyed the night before. Shiraishi recognizes Obusuma Saburo, an exile who fled during the attack, and demands to know what he is doing there. Obusuma says he has something interesting to share. When Teruhi finds out who he is, she scolds him for fleeing and walks off. Shiraishi tells Obusuma to speak with him later and follows her. After nearly an hour of running, Amushi finally catches up to Sana and claims victory. They both laugh, realizing how silly the race was. Sana, now cheerful, says she hasn't felt that happy in a long time. When the group arrives at the main Toyborai settlement, they are impressed by the infrastructure and comment on a large stone thrower. Amushi appears and shares what he saw from the walls, explaining that the wall stretches over a mile with 4 gates. This leads Kuchi to question whether they have enough guards to defend it. A guard then mocks Amushi, but Sana defends him and calls him by his real name, continuing to show him around. The guard, noticing this, wonders aloud what has changed in Sana since she climbed the walls with Amushi. Kano chuckles and tells Teruhi about a legend claiming that walking along the castle wall brings couples together. Hearing this, Teruhi looks at Kuchi and walks away shyly when he mentions walking the walls for a different reason. Eventually, everyone gathers at the town hall, where Nagamin serves them kamakuran black porgy with dried dolphin and seki. He jokes about how ironic it is that they eat the same foods as the capital. Himaru starts eating, and Nagamin praises Su Sukakuni's bravery during the Sasu Bay battle. The Tsushima survivors thank the Toyborai people for their hospitality and speak highly of the wall protecting them. Before they get too comfortable, Kuchi interrupts, rudely warning that the fortress would not last a day if the Mongols attacked now. When asked why, he says there are not enough guards stationed at the wall, which is a serious problem for them, and the female divers from earlier instantly surround him. Meanwhile, Shiraishi meets with Obusuma again and asks him to share the information he promised. Obusuma, upon revealing a silver badge, tells Shiraishi that he's found a way for them to escape. Moments after checking the authenticity of the silver badge, Shiraishi recognizes what it is and asks Obusuma if the letters written on it are Mongolian. After assuring him that they are, Obusuma asks why he is fighting so hard for the lives of people he knows nothing about. Shiraishi, after giving the question some thought, says it is because he feels sorry for the islanders who were slaughtered by the Mongols. Mongols. Almost instantly, Obusuma calls nonsense and tells Shiraishi to stop fighting for free and instead fight for a reward, like the proud samurai he once was. Having considered Obusuma's words, Shiraishi finally agrees to hear him out. Meanwhile, Kuchi, still held at knife point, fearlessly tells Nagamine and the others that they should get as far away from the Mongols as possible, as he is almost certain they will find the castle soon. Hearing this, Nagamine says they cannot abandon the place because it would crush the morale of his soldiers, who wish to fight and die on their ancestral lands. Upon hearing Nagamine's words, Kuchi quickly figures out why they were welcomed into the castle with no resistance. As it turns out, Nagamine wanted more men to fill his ranks so that when the Mongols eventually attacked, there would be more soldiers to defend the castle. With nothing more to hide, the elder near Nagamine tells Kuchi that he and his people are free to leave if they want to. However, should they go, the Mongols are not the only thing they need to worry about. Surviving the general winter, which is just around the corner, is also something to fear, so they should consider that. At this point, Kuchi is torn. Before answering, he storms off to wash by the nearby stream. While he is there, 4 guards approach and tease him for suggesting they abandon the castle, asking him to teach them his infamous Gike sword style using just a stick. In response, Kuchi picks up a small weed twig, annoys the mouthiest one, and breaks his nose when he charges at him. Apparently, since the Gike sword style is meant for killing, even training with a stick could lead to fatal injuries. Despite that, the guard attacks blindly and gets his nose broken again. Now fully enraged, the soldier tells Kuchi he is ready to die in training as long as it is on his ancestral land. Inspired by these words, Kuchi agrees to fight all 4 guards at once, on the condition that they reveal their identities after they lose. Around this same time, someone informs the other guards and the Tsushima survivors that Kuchi and some guards are fighting. As a crowd gathers, they find Kuchi just finishing his sparring match. He angrily explains what happened and dismisses them. Afterwards, he asks to know the names of the 4 guards, and they tell him. He then asks the others to do the same, saying that if they are willing to fight beside strangers against the Mongols, they should at least know each other's names before the battle. By then, Nagamine arrives at the scene and asks if this means Kuchi has truly agreed to fight. Kuchi replies that he is only repaying a debt to Nagamine, but after speaking for a bit longer, he says he plans to strengthen the castle's defense and hopes they can work well together. Nagamine then shakes hands with Kuchi and agrees to cooperate. In the next scene, Obusuma tells Shiraishi that he reached a village 2 days after leaving Sasu Bay. He lies about being invited by a kind family and then being attacked by villagers. According to him, the Mongols came just as the villagers were about to execute him, slaughtered them, and took him in. In time, they gave him the silver Mongol pass and made him their spy. Now, he wants Shiraishi to join him so they can gain massive rewards once the Mongol parade ends, and maybe become governors. Before Shiraishi can respond, the scene shifts to a meeting in Ide's private quarters with his battalion commanders. They are frustrated, having been unable to find the Japanese survivors. As they consider their next move, one older commander suggests abandoning the search, letting the troops rest, and departing the port a few days later, as the priest had advised. After some consideration, Eddie, disappointed about losing his chance at Teruhi, decides to abandon the chase and tells his men to stop wasting time. Just then, Nergui, the man who turned Obusuma into a spy, arrives. He tells Eddie about his network of spies and advises waiting for a report by day's end. Upon hearing this, Eddie smiles and changes his mind. Elsewhere, Obusuma continues trying to convince Shiraishi to betray the others. After thinking it over, Shiraishi says he does not want to lose his soul or betray everyone's trust. Disappointed, Obusuma tells a story about betraying his brother in the past. Shiraishi, tired of hearing about betrayal, turns his back and walks away. Obusuma then tries to strike him from behind, but Shiraishi, expecting this, cuts him down and tells him he saw it coming. Seconds later, Onami, one of the female divers, approaches, scared, and asks why he attacked Obusuma. Shiraishi explains that Obusuma was a Mongol spy and had to be dealt with. Satisfied, Onami decides to bring someone to witness the scene so Shiraishi does not get into trouble. Sadly, before she gets far, Shiraishi pulls her close and stabs her with his tachi katana. It becomes clear he intended to betray the group from the start, but refused to work with Obusuma. He lays her body beside Obusuma's and places her sword in her hands to make it look like she killed him. A few hundred miles away, at the Chikuzen Dazefu Magistrate Fortress, Kageshuke, who has been gathering troops, tells his second-in-command to load the ships with as many arrows, soldiers, and supplies as possible so they can sail to Tsushima. Thinking about Kuchi, Kagesuke hopes he is still alive when they arrive. Around the same time, Teruhi approaches Kuchi, who is sharpening his sword, and asks if he is sure Keigesuke will keep his promise. Kuchi confidently assures her that Keigesuke will. Teruhi makes a few vague comments and walks away, pretending to know what she means. After she leaves, Kuchi worries that Kagesuke might let them down at the last minute and hopes he keeps his promise. By twilight, the civilians find Onami's body near Obusuma's and assume he died trying to force himself on her. When Nagamine arrives, he examines Obusuma's fatal wound and grows suspicious, but keeps his thoughts to himself. Later, Kuchi learns about Obusuma's death from their scout, Amushi. While the others believe the story, Kuchi finds it odd that Obusuma would be killed so easily, given his skill with a sword. Soon he asks about Shiraishi's whereabouts, and when told he has been missing for hours, Kuchi becomes suspicious. By nightfall, Shiraishi arrives at Ide's camp and surrenders himself to the Mongols. Once brought inside, he tells them everything about Nagamin's castle in the northern mountains. At one point, Nergui doubts his honesty, but Ide gives Shiraishi a chance to come clean and determine the size of his reward. Shiraishi then tells them the castle's weakness. It is poorly guarded. He also promises there will be many valuables and slaves to plunder. When he finishes, he becomes overwhelmed with guilt, which even Ide notices. To comfort him, Ide promises generous rewards. He then sends Shiraishi back to the Japanese camp to continue deceiving everyone. About an hour later, Nagamin introduces the exiles to sulfur, a stinky substance that creates fire. He then digresses to discuss Shiraishi's absence. Realizing he is truly missing, Nagamin tells Kuchi he suspects Shiraishi's disappearance may be related to Obusuma's death. Kuchi asks for clarification, and Nagamin explains that the diver's short katana could not have caused the wound on Obusuma's body. As he analyzes the earlier scene, Shiraishi returns with a large boar carcass, claiming he has been hunting. Kuchi and the others believe him and welcome him back, but Nagamin, remembering the wound he saw, remains suspicious. Eventually, the tension fades. Kimaru, out of sake, asks someone to sing to lighten the mood. Teruhi likes the idea and calls on Kano to sing the Hayata songs from their childhood. At first, Kano refuses, too shy, but after much persuasion, she sings the lead while Teruhi joins in harmony. The next morning, Nagamin's scouts see Mongolian smoke signals nearby and report this to Nagamin, who predicts they will reach the castle by afternoon. Kuchi, who overhears, realizes the war he's been waiting for is finally here, so he prepares himself for the Mongols' arrival. About an hour before the Mongols arrive at the castle, Nagamin gathers everyone, both native Toyboraians and the refugees, and tells them all that they now have to obey the Toyborai leadership without question. While Teruhi seems to have no problem with it, as she's more concerned about their soldier headcount, Kuchi finishes making a miniature model of the castle wall and invites Nagamin to come show them where they'll be going before the Mongols arrive at the castle. For the first few minutes, everyone marvels over how accurate the miniature map is, with Kimaru getting jealous, but as soon as the niceties are over, Nagamin talks strategy. For starters, he knows that the Mongols' main army will be approaching them from the south gate, so to stop them, he's going to place the few defenders they have there at the gate. By this time, Shiraishi, the traitor, asks Nagamin about how many defenders will be on the west gate, and Nagamin tells him they can't put that many on the castle's rear, so they might put about 10 soldiers there. Upon hearing this, Shiraishi volunteers to be placed amongst those 10 soldiers, citing that the steep mountainside might make the enemy harder to spot. Impressed by his act, Kuchi commends the traitor for having an eye for detail, and Nagamin lets Shiraishi do his thing. Soon after, Nagamin talks about placing everyone else at the south gate, but then Kuchi tells him that he's not going to be there, as he would like to be placed outside, alongside a few others, and to properly welcome the enemy troops to their castle. A few minutes later, a small battalion from Edia's main army approaches the Toyboraian castle swiftly to get the spoils before the others do. Somewhere along the line, they get into a dense forest, and don't notice the increase in vegetation with each path they pass. In due time, some arrows are fired at them, which kill about 2 men, but before they panic, their general quickly figures out where some of the Toyboraians are hiding above them, and shoots at them. Following that, the Mongols engage those hiding in the trees, and fail to notice those lying on the ground in ghillie suits below them. Once the time is right, Kuchi, as well as a handful of other Toyboraian soldiers, reveal themselves and kill as many enemies as they can before returning to the castle. As soon as the Mongols spot them running away, they try their best to pursue them, but ultimately end up not catching them. As soon as Kuchi and the soldiers are in the safety of the castle, with the south gate now sealed, Nagamin commends Kuchi for forcing the Mongols to focus their attention on the south gate before allowing him to get some rest while he takes over from there. With the Mongols now in their trap, Nagamin gives the order, and the battle between Toyboraians and Mongols begins. For about 30 minutes, both sides fire as many arrows as they can at each other, and the commander of the Mongol troops commends his men for knowing exactly what to do in situations like this. Soon enough, Nagamin notices the Mongols using their shields to effectively create shield formations, just so they can move out of an archer's range before rushing for the walls. To foil their plans, he urges the female divers from earlier to prepare their siege weapons, aka the stone thrower or stone catapult, and fire at the shielded soldiers. Once the weapons are ready, the girls fire the stones and manage to break through most of the Mongol shields in little time, leaving Kuchi impressed by their teamwork and courage. Seeing this, the enemy commander encourages his men to keep pushing forward, and the Mongols keep doing this until they eventually get their ladders up the walls of the castle. Sadly, before many of them get to the top of the wall to lay siege to the castle, they either get their skulls bashed in by logs, stones, and heavy objects hauled by strong lads like Kimaru, or they get shot at with several arrows. At this point, the commander of 200 Mongols considers attacking another wall, but just then, Funbishi, another commander from Ede's army, shows up and advises that they join forces and attack the south gate slowly, so they can buy the other soldiers some time to infiltrate the castle from the other side, as per Eddie's orders. Around that same time, Eddie, who's somewhere in the woods a few clicks away from the south gate, repeats the same strategy to Karaun, who tells him that Ochirubato, or Bato's 200 soldiers, should be reaching the west wall as they speak. While watching the west wall, Shiraishi manages to convince about 6 soldiers, who were worried sick about the south gate, to go join the others there so they can protect their families so he can watch the west wall alone. Once they're gone, Shiraishi discovers 3 out of the 4 guards who trained with Kuchi earlier, refusing to go with the remaining 6, and endures listening to them talk big about not abandoning him, a nobleman. Just as they're about to continue watching over the the wall, Shiraishi loses his shit and lets Bato's forces kill the 3 guards. Once the deed is done, Bato, the commander of the small army, talks about his hate for traitors for a few seconds, and then rushes the castle's citadel from behind. As Bato's forces fade out of sight, Shiraishi spews out some philosophical nonsense about being a traitor and reveling in it. In time, Bato's forces approach the citadel swiftly, but Kuchi, Nagamine, and the others notice the lack of aggressiveness from the Mongols fighting at the south gate and figure that they must be buying some time for a smaller force to attack them from another side of their wall. While they try to figure out the Mongols' endgame, the citadel behind them erupts in flames, causing Kuchi and the others to fear that the worst has happened. At the same moment the explosion happens, Eddie figures Bato's violence must have led him to set the place on fire, but now that their treasure will be turned to dust, he tells the others to attack from all sides. Just as the Mongols stationed at the east wall are about to infiltrate the wall, they're suddenly met with burning Mongol soldiers escaping the eastern walls and screaming in excruciating pain. For a few moments, they figure it must be their enemies, but when they realize that the men burning and falling over the east wall are from their army, they get very scared and consider retreating. Seconds before they retreat, one of the burning men approaches them and warns them about the fire curse inside the citadel before dying. Funbishi, sensing the guy might be right, decides to run away. So, what happened to Bato's forces? Turns out, while they were on their way to the citadel earlier, they ran into that old man from earlier and some priests performing some kind of ritual and decided to kill them off first, thinking they were weak. Before long, the old man finished the ritual and set fire to Bato's forces and the citadel after saying a prayer to the ancestors. Soon after seeing the burning Mongols, Funbishi and his army face Teruhi and about 4 dozen Toyboraians guarding the eastern wall and instantly fall back in defeat. Shortly after driving them off, Teruhi tells her people that they have to protect the citadel at all costs. Just then, someone from the south gate shows up to help the princess, but when Teruhi doesn't see Kuchi coming along with him, she gets pissed and jealous that he would choose the south gate over her wall. As for Kuchi and the others, they comment on the burning citadel and wait patiently for the Mongols' response. While Nagamine and the others aren't sure of what to expect, Kuchi is itching and praying that they charge at them. By the time Eddie finds out about Bato's fate, he gets angry, ignores Karan's advice about retreating to preserve their men, and then orders that they launch a full-scale attack to make the Toyboraians pay for what they just did. Around that same time, Kuchi opens the south gate and launches a full-scale attack to find and kill the general of the army. After killing off a few Mongol soldiers, Kuchi spots Ede hiding in the rear and charges at him. Unfortunately, he gets blocked by one of the soldiers and is noticed by Ede, who recognizes him instantly and orders that everyone attack so they don't lose any more commanders. Realizing he can't get close anymore, Kuchi retreats with his people and then overhears the fat Ede mouthing off orders to kill him before he gets to the castle. Irritated by the idiot's orders, Kuchi turns, shoots an arrow at the general's head, and unfortunately, has the arrow blocked by a random Mongol. Having seen just how strong Kuchi's will is, Eddie gets a little depressed as he realizes just how many men they're going to lose if they keep attacking the castle. Recalling their main mission, Karan advises them to abandon the siege, and this time, Eddie finally agrees to retreat. Shortly after the battle, the soldiers who ran from the west wall are caught and brought for punishment, but when they explain what Shiraishi told them earlier, Nagamine thinks about every suspicious thing Shiraishi has been doing so far and asks Kuchi if he finds it very weird. Initially, Kuchi and the others tell Nagamine that Shiraishi isn't that kind of person, as he'd rather die than betray them, but just to be sure, Kuchi leaves for the west wall to check things out. When he gets there, he finds the bodies of those he trained with earlier and spots Shiraishi sitting by the edge of a cliff. Upon inching closer to him, Kuchi updates Shiraishi on the battle, and then asks why he's not following the Mongols back to camp. In response, Shiraishi, while arming himself, tells Kuchi that he can't return to them until he has his head. At this point, Kuchi confronts Shiraishi for being a spy and asks if the tears he shed for the islanders who were burned by the Mongols a few days ago were fake. Shiraishi takes a moment to remember those tears, calls Kuchi a softie, and reveals that he wasn't pretending to be sorry. As it turns out, Shiraishi was also betrayed by a neighboring lord in the past and sent into exile after the man tricked everyone into believing he was a bad person, causing him to lose everything. After experiencing that heartbreaking betrayal, Shiraishi realized that betrayal always comes from those closest to you, as they are the ones who truly desire your downfall. So, what he's doing now is not true betrayal, but a fight to reclaim his clan and lands by any means necessary. Having heard all this, Kuchi challenges him to a duel to the death and arms himself. Before the fight begins, Shiraishi weighs his options and figures that his Naginata will give him an advantage in long-ranged combat. He takes a swing at Kuchi, who dodges the first attack while charging forward. Shiraishi drops his Naginata to dodge Kuchi's attack and tries to kill him with his second blade. What he doesn't know is that Kuchi still has the short sword Kagesuke gave him tucked into his belt. So, as Shiraishi moves to slit his throat, Kuchi unsheathes the short sword and slashes him in the stomach, ending the fight in one move. As Shiraishi lies on the ground, regretting underestimating the Gikei style, an arrow from one of the female divers hits him from the bushes. One of Onami's friends, after shouting nonsense, prepares her crossbow to fire again. This time, however, Kuchi and Nagamine tell her to stay out of the exile business, and she backs down. Shiraishi then talks about the souls clinging to Kuchi's arm and begs him to cut off his head so he can join them. Before doing so, Kuchi appreciates the time he spent fighting beside the real Shiraishi Shiraishi and promises to treasure that memory. Realizing his time is up, Shiraishi thanks him for showing him the real way of the warrior and makes him promise to save the island. With that, Kuchi slices off Shiraishi's head and asks Nagamine where it should go. Before he responds, Teruhi appears and volunteers to take the head. When asked what she plans to do with it, she says she'll either hang it at the castle gate or throw it off the side of the road, as Shiraishi's crime is unforgivable. Kuchi, unable to argue, tells her to do whatever she wants. That night, Kuchi finds Teruhi secretly burying Shiraishi's head as though he were part of their clan and says nothing. Later, Nagamine and one of the elders talk about the burning citadel and estimate that the fire will disappear in 2 days. While Nagamine explains his plans for the citadel after it finishes burning, Kimaru and the others cook the meat of the boar Shiraishi killed the day before and eat it. Shortly after, Puku, who cannot eat, calls his fellow exiles together, saying he has something important to tell them. As it gets dark, Teruhi sneaks up to Kuchi's sleeping spot like she always does. While muttering insults about how he sleeps, Sasamaru, Genshichi's child, approaches with a sword, ready to kill Kuchi. Before he gets the chance, Teruhi reveals herself and stops the frightened child, telling him that killing someone in their sleep is cowardly. She then lies beside Kuchi, wondering what he plans to do once the Mongol War ends. Soon, she grows aroused and kisses him, but then notices a kid watching and scares him off. Once the kid leaves, Kuchi wakes up and asks what she's doing there. Teruhi, as usual, gives a nonsense excuse until a commotion erupts at the south gate, and they leave to check it out. While they rush to the gate, the castle priest prays to show them the outcome of the battle with the Mongols. Soon after, Nagamine, Kuchi, and others reach the south gate and find dozens of elk and deer gathered near the walls. While many are confused, Nagamine and Kuchi realize that the animals are fleeing from a large army, the Mongols. At one point, Teruhi asks why this didn't happen earlier that day, and Kuchi explains it's because this army is larger than any they've faced before. Despite the revelation, the soldiers remain in high spirits and encourage each other to fight to the death. Kuchi, though worried, begins brainstorming a way to escape this situation. Meanwhile, the priest finishes his prayers and begs for guidance, but the worship stone collapses and kills him in a fire. Elsewhere, Puku takes the exiles, excluding Kuchi, to a loaded raft he found on the coast, and tries to convince them to leave the north and sail away to avoid the impending battle. After making his plea, the others remain silent, and Puku tries harder to persuade them. Kimaru then openly makes plans to leave, prompting the archer exile to insult him. When Puku tries to get Amushi to join, Amushi sees Sana watching from a shrub and quickly refuses. The archer says he'd rather find a bigger ship and take his chances, so he's not going either. The bald doctor also refuses, but Kimaru boards the raft with Puku and sets sail. The others watch as they leave. Not long after, Sana confronts Amushi for trying to abandon her. Amushi, pretending he didn't see her, denies it. The two argue as usual, while the archer watches in silence. Meanwhile, Nagamine and the others hear about the priest's death, but instead of taking it as a bad omen, Nagamine twists the story to boost morale. The elder priest says the man sacrificed himself for victory and instructs the priestesses to continue praying while he spreads the manipulated story further. When Kuchi hears about the shrine incident, he discusses it with Nagamine, but then brings up the Mongols. To reassure Kuchi, Nagamine says he has already sent scouts into the woods who will send a signal once the Mongols are spotted, so there's nothing to worry about. At that time, 2 scouts spot around 20 Mongol torches in the woods. Before they can report back, Eastern Mongol Vice Marshal Kuchakyu beheads them and orders his men to always kill scouts. Thereafter, he commands them to light more torches to frighten the enemy, and that's exactly what they do. Minutes later, Kuchi and the others see hundreds of torches in the woods and quickly realize they are surrounded. Nagamine wakes everyone, and Amushi appears to tell Kuchi about Puku and Kimaru. After hearing the terrible news, Kuchi urges them to be brave and prepare to fight. On the raft, Kimaru tells Puku not to compare him to Kuchi, claiming that the Kuchi they know now is fake. Back then, he feared Kuchi's judgment, but now, he feels nothing. As the Mongols approach, Kuchi asks Nagamine what the plan is, since the enemy will reach the castle by dawn. Just then, Teruhi arrives and suggests abandoning the castle before the enemy arrives. Nagamine rejects this, saying that's exactly what the enemy wants. When she pushes again, he tells her to flee with her people and die in the snow if they wish. Realizing the severity of the situation, Kuchi proposes an alternative survival strategy, evacuating the castle and hiding in the mountains while waiting for reinforcements. When Nagamine questions whether reinforcements will come, Kuchi avoids the question and urges him to decide stay and fight or follow the plan. After weighing the options, Nagamine chooses Kuchi's plan and orders the evacuation. Just then, they receive word of a fleet approaching from the northern sea. At the same time, Kimaru and Puku see the fleet and pause to examine the flags. Elsewhere, Kagesuke orders his men to ready the ships and prepare to sail for Tsushima. His father, Shoni Tsukiyoshi, or Yoshi for short, bursts in and forbids it. Even when Kagesuke argues that they could delay the Mongols and trap them in the snow, Yoshi insists they think about the bigger picture. If Japan survives the war, what happens when other clans begin to fight for control of the shogunate? If they send 3-0 men to Tsushima now, no one knows what might happen later. Yoshi recounts the sacrifice of Sukakuni and the Tsushima Tsushima warriors who fought for the war's longevity, and commands Kagesuke to cancel the mission. Meanwhile, the unfortunate truth is, revealed the Northern Fleet belongs to the Mongols, and Kuchi realizes how trapped they truly are. A few minutes before dawn, Kuchi is calling together his remaining exile friends and giving them all a chance to run away and hide before the battle begins. Amushi, Duen, the doctor, and Hitari, the expert archer, all tell him they are sticking together till the end. Just then, one of the Toyborai soldiers walks up to Kuchi and asks him to tell everyone why he is fighting so hard for the survival of the island. If anything, Kuchi has only been there for a week, which is not enough time for him to become too attached to anyone, and besides, everyone is curious to know. In response, Kuchi tells the man that he has only fought so hard in the war because there was a battle going on in front of him when he came. Upon recalling the experiences he has had since he arrived on the island, Sukekuni, Abiru, Shiraishi, and Umajiru's deaths, Kuchi gets up and tells everyone that not only have things changed, but he can now remember all their faces and fight alongside them as comrades. Even though he is not a fan of the island, Kuchi tells them all that it is a good island because they are there, and this makes him want to fight the war. Following all that, he mutters a few more words to the suicidal soldiers and ends up inspiring them to lay their lives down for the survival of Tsushima Island. As the Toyborai soldiers scream out in support of the battle, the Mongols arrive and set up a formation in front of the south gate. Despite noticing their overwhelming numbers, Kuchi and the Toyborai sound the battle cry as the final war of their lives begins. In due time, both sides fire as many arrows and projectiles as they can to take down each other before the main battle begins. While some of the Mongols fire arrows at the Toyboraians on the wall, others try to ram the south gate open, and the vice marshal, Ku, encourages the soldiers to keep going at their enemies aggressively so they can be done with their campaign by sunset and return to Sasu Bay before they get treated as defectors. Upon giving the order to keep fighting, the Mongols continue pushing the south gate wall, and the Toyboraians keep defending until Nagamine gets word that some Mongols have also infiltrated the eastern wall. Knowing fully well that he needs to send reinforcements to protect those there, Nagamine calls Kuchi and tells him he will consider his debt to them repaid if he can defend the east wall for them. Kuchi gets very excited to hear this, so he jokes around a little and eventually pushes for the east wall, taking some soldiers with him. After doing her best to defend the east wall for as long as she could, the Mongols eventually break through and attack everyone there. In an attempt to get the princess out of trouble, Gontaru gets attacked by a large Mongol and pinned down. Somewhere along the line, another fat Mongol bastard also manages to get Kano out of the way and pin Princess Teruhi down. Thankfully, before the man has his way with her, Teruhi slits his throat, but soon faces yet another fat bastard who raises his spear to kill her. Again, before that happens, Kuchi arrives to help and kills him with an arrow. To avoid looking weak, Teruhi acts tough, cleans off her tears, and walks away. To speed up the success of their campaign, the Mongols fire their cannons at the south gate and wait for it to go down. Before that happens, however, Nagamine calls Tatsu and tells her to gather all the female stone throwers so they can carry out a contingency plan. As soon as they arrive, Nagamine has the ladies take the supports from the watchtower, and this causes the watch to fall behind the gate and seal it even further. With the little time they have bought, Nagamine tells the female stone throwers to gather all the women and children and escape into the woods. When he tells Tatsu to join them, she refuses and insists she would like to stay behind with Nagamine. Nagamine tells her a few more things about them living together, but as Tatsu is about to respond, an explosion from the lit Mongol cannonballs blows the barricaded gates behind her open and injures her fatally. Realizing this is the end for her, Tatsu does her best to confess her love for Nagamine, but unfortunately, it is already too late for her as she staggers, stammers for a few seconds, and then collapses to the ground. By this time, Nagamine loses his temper and kills off dozens of Mongol soldiers breaking through their now open south gate, but eventually, he gets stabbed by the enemy soldiers. Right before he loses his life, he tells his soldiers a few inspiring things to ensure they do not lose hope and give up, even after his death. Once he is done giving his final speech to the soldiers, Nagamine falls and dies alongside his beloved Tatsu. Around that same time, Kuchi, Teruhi, and the others soon find out about Nagamine's death from Amushi as they continue fighting off the Mongols, who have also made it through the eastern gates. While the others lament, Teruhi asks Amushi to tell her where the other islanders ran to, and Amushi says they all just split up and ran for dear life. With that said, he tells Kuchi that he is moving and says his goodbyes before disappearing into the woods. With the Mongols already scaling the once proud eastern wall, Genpachi advises Teruhi that they escape now before they get caught. Teruhi then asks Kuchi if he can keep the Mongols at bay so the other islanders escape, but he says no, as the castle is already too big and impossible to defend. As such, the only thing they can do now is guard the islanders as they flee for safety. But before they get to that, Hitari, the archer, shows up and helps keep some of the army stragglers at bay, while Kuchi and the others escape into the woods. Upon exchanging a few jokes and words with each other, they split and escape. As for Amushi, he reunites with Sana, alongside some other little kids, and urges them to get out of there before it is too late. After they discuss Tatsu and the others' whereabouts, Sana tells Amushi that she knows a way out of the forest, but she is almost certain that the Mukuri will be on the way there. Not to worry though, as Amushi shows her a cannonball he stole from the Mongol camp earlier, and says he is going to distract the Mukuri with it if they come across them. With the stage set, they press on further into the forest. Meanwhile, Teruhi and the others, while on the run, try to figure out the best place to hide for now, but unfortunately for them, they run into some Mongols on their way. Excited, Kuchi tells Teruhi and the others to keep going up the mountain and leave him there so he can keep them at bay, but Teruhi refuses, telling him that he is going to die die if he faces the Mongols all alone. With no time left to argue, Kano holds Teruhi captive before she acts recklessly and drags her away from Kuchi Jinzaburo, so he does not die in vain. Shortly after she is gone, about a dozen other Toyborai warriors decide to stick with Kuchi and fight with him, takes the fight to the Mongols, and takes down as many of them as he can. At one point in the battle, Kuchie gets pinned down by a large Mongol, but then Kimaru joins the battle and takes the man's head off. Thereafter, Kuchi asks him what he is still doing on the island when he is supposed to be in Kyushu now, and Kimaru practically says it is because he just cannot abandon him yet. Soon after, he talks about the face of the beast Kuchi always puts on, asking why Kuchi is not wearing it anymore, but then Kuchi tells him that his face is still doing fine, as he is the one who should be worried about his heart turning good. In any case, the duo ends their talk in time, clash swords like friends, and skillfully take down more Mongols like animals. At one point, even the other Toyboraians get so inspired watching those two fight that they just damn the consequences and face the Mongols head on. In the meantime, Hitari arrives at a small resting spot and finds Duen treating a small number of Toyboraians wounded from the battle. Upon explaining everything that has happened to Hitari, he advises them to run while they still can, and the scene ends. Right after taking down the small fry, Kuchi and the others soon realize that a few other Mongols are coming down the mountain to get them. Seeing as they can only take down a few of them at a time, Kuchi tries to think of a way out. Just then, Kimaru tells him to let him fight the Mongols, so he can buy them some time to escape, and Kuchi, shocked to hear this from the pirate, asks why he is volunteering to give up his life. After Kimaru gives him a good reason, Kuchi decides to let him handle the Mongols, and tells him that he is fighting for those by his side, not the islanders, before heading up the mountain. Shortly after Kuchi's departure, the vice marshal, Ryu, shows up with a handful of soldiers and asks Kimaru to tell him where to find Kuchi. When Kimaru refuses to give Kuchi's location up, the proud fool spouts some more nonsense before charging at Kimaru, who also does the same, to fight. Elsewhere, Teruhi and the rest of the forces gather up as many branches and roots as they can to barricade the path and protect it with their lives. As soon as Ku arrives, he charges at them and fights. Around that same time, Duen tells Hitari, who has been trying to get him to escape, that he just cannot abandon any of his patients because he needs to balance out the account for causing the deaths of thousands of people in the past by saving as many lives as he can. Just as Hitari is about to respond, a single Mongol soldier shoots his gun at one of Duen's patients, but Duen ends up taking the hit for the guy. After killing off the bastard, Hitari turns to Duen to help him out, but it is already too late as Duen dies instantly. Soon after, 3 other Mongols show up with guns, and Hitari, irritated by their new weapon, charges at them with 3 arrows for each of them. Before they load their guns, he sinks the arrows inside all 3 of them, causing one of them to misfire his gun and blow himself up. As the smoke from the explosion clears, Hitari finds several other archers aiming their bows at him and fires an arrow at one of them. In a split second, Hitari gets killed with multiple enemy arrows and dies with a smile on his face. As the battle between Teruhi's and Ko's forces deepens, the Mongols manage to break the Toyboraian formation. Realizing that they are now pinned down, the soldiers from the Sioux and Toyboraian clan charge at the enemy and fight them with everything they have left. In that instant, Teruhi gets to see all the islanders she has known for ages lose their lives to the Mongols. Just then, Kuchi clears a path behind them and tells every one of them to climb down the escape route he is opening. Without fail, Teruhi and everyone available run down the escape path as quickly as they can for dear life. When Ku figures out where Kuchi is, he warns his soldiers not to let their guards down yet, as Kuchi is much stronger than they give him credit for. By the time Teruhi and the others get to the opening Kuchi just created for them, Ku has one of his goons throw a cannonball explosive at Kuchi's location. Once the cannonballs hit the cliff where Kuchi is, he falls into the river beneath, and Teruhi is left screaming her lungs out as she thinks she has just witnessed the love of her life die. Shortly after getting blown off the cliff, Kuchi passes out and sinks further into the abyss of the deep estuary river. While he is sinking, the river takes the form of a great white shark and swims around Kuchi's unconscious body, teasing his spirit and encouraging him to keep drifting down the river so he can leave everything behind and join it in the spirit world. As for Teruhi, her world is crashing down as the Mongols, having finally taken down Kuchi Jinzaburo, intensify their attacks and quickly kill off several Tsushima warriors. For several minutes, the Tsushima soldiers do their best to stand their ground, but it is already too late as the Mongols overwhelm and defeat them all. As Teruhi watches her men die one by one, she gives up and prepares herself for death, but Gantaru holds her up and urges her to remember the Emperor's words about surviving the Mongol attacks. Even knowing that, Teruhi insists that since their savior, Kuchi, is dead, then all is lost and there is nothing they can do on their own now. Just then, Gantaru assures her that there is a chance Kuchi is still alive, as he saw him fall into the estuary waters during the attack. With a glimmer of hope in her eyes, Teruhi stares at Gantaru and asks if he is telling the truth. Once Gantaru confirms it, Kano shows up and hurries them toward an escape path she discovered earlier. With no time to waste, Teruhi and the few soldiers left follow Kano and run for their lives. Around that same time, Amushi, Sana, and a few other children, who have been sneaking through the forest to get to safety, finally encounter Mongols searching carefully for them and stop to figure a way out. Realizing it is impossible to turn back now, Amushi opens his treasure and decides to find a fire he can use to ignite the explosive and create a distraction. Soon, he spots a Mongol campfire nearby and tells Sana he is going to stick the explosive in the fire, so that once it detonates and distracts the Mongols, she should run forward and escape while he circles around and rejoins them later. Before he leaves, Sana asks if he regrets not leaving the island that night on Puku's ship, but Amushi tells her he does not, since there is no one left waiting for him at the capital. With that said, he leaves, this, plants the explosive in the campfire, and makes a run for the river. Before he gets there, a Mongol soldier grabs him, but a Mushi quickly slits the throats of both the soldier and his partner, then continues running. Sadly, just as he is about to jump into the sea, one of the soldiers stabs him with a spear and lets him sink. Without hesitation, Sana jumps into the sea to save a Mushi, but even she knows it is already too late. Meanwhile, Teruhi, Kano, and the few others make it into a smoky area of the forest and let their guard down. Unfortunately, Gontaru is struck in the shoulder by an arrow, and Mongols hidden in the trees reveal themselves. Undeterred, Gontaru talks tough and soon takes more arrows. Refusing to go down without a fight, he moves forward to strike the enemy, but trips on a tree root before dealing any damage. In his final moments, he tells Kano to protect the princess at all costs. Realizing what she must do, Kano grabs Teruhi, runs a few meters, pushes them both into a ditch, and then, without explanation, slightly strangles Teruhi until she passes out, crying and apologizing the whole time. Once Teruhi is unconscious, Kano covers her with leaves and leads the Mongols in another direction. After attacking and killing a few of them, she is eventually caught and raped to death by the enemy soldiers. During all this, Kuchi, still unconscious and submerged, recalls a memory from 4 years ago in his home at Kamakura. Back then, his wife and daughter were still alive. One day, Kuchi, being a strict man, found his daughter planting a persimmon tree in their yard. He not only uprooted the seedling but warned her never to plant trees in the mansion again. With his daughter crying, Kuchi left unfazed, only to return that evening and find her standing guard over another persimmon seedling she had planted behind his back. This time, Kuchi went easy on her and asked if she truly intended to disobey her father. The girl said yes, because that was how he taught her to be a samurai who protects her dear friends, in this case, the tree. Impressed by her answer, Kuchi asked if she was truly willing to go that far to protect it. Through tears, she promised never to leave its side until it blossomed. Satisfied, Kuchi let her stay there all night to learn her lesson and walked away. Some hours later, after dark, intruders broke into the fence and spotted the girl sitting under a blanket and guarding the seedling. As soon as she saw them, she screamed to alert her father. The intruders rushed to silence her, but Kuchi arrived just in time, asked if they knew whose house they had broken into, and knocked them all out with bamboo sticks. He then handed them over to the authorities and explained to his daughter that trees give intruders good hiding spots, which is why he did not want them planted in the yard. Even so, his daughter reminded him of his promise to let the tree live if she protected it. Finally, Kuchi calmed down, carried her inside, and let her keep the tree. Days later, the tree began to grow, and Kuchi learned the lesson of protecting what matters until the very end. As the memory ends, Kuchi regains consciousness underwater, cuts away the weights dragging him down, and quickly swims back to the surface. Just as he is about to break through, his lungs give out, and he collapses again. This time, however, the shark reappears and somehow helps him reach the shore before he drowns. The next time he opens his eyes, he finds himself on the riverbank and stands up to continue the fight. After trekking through the forest for a few minutes, he stumbles upon a massacre of Tsushima soldiers and citizens who were killed by the Mongols. As he walks among the corpses, recognizing some of them, Kuchi sits on a stump, overcome with grief. Suddenly Sasamaru, the son of Ginshichite, first betrayerizes from the pile of corpses, rants about revenge, and prepares to fight Kuchi. He swings his sword, but it does not even cut Kuchi's skin. Kuchi grabs the sword away, scolds the boy, and promises to show him how to properly wield a weapon. Elsewhere, Ku and his Mongol soldiers round up a few slaves from the surviving Toyborai group and prepare to return to Sasu Bay to resume their journey to the mainland. Just as they are about to leave, Kuchi attacks a soldier who complains, then alerts the rest and kills as many as he can, while Sasamaru works to free the slaves. Soon after, when a Mongol tries to flee, the proud Vice Marshal Ryu shows up, slices the man's neck for cowardice, and mocks Kuchi, calling him a wild dog. After a few more insults, Ryu tosses over Kemaru's sword and tells Kuchi whose it was. Kuchi picks up the blade, remembers Kemaru's face, listens to Ryu's taunts, and finally challenges the man to fight. Ryu charges with murderous intent and barely misses slicing Kuchi, who dodges expertly. At one point, Ryu throws rocks to distract him and attempts a kill strike. Kuchi recovers and keeps fighting, listening as Ryu mocks his sword style. Finally fed up, Kuchi intensifies his attacks and slams his sword repeatedly against Ryu's naginata, eventually knocking the man to the ground. As Ryu tries to rise, his naginata breaks, and the soldiers surround him for protection. Kuchi steps into their midst, frightening them, and stops in front of Ryu, who is now terrified of the man standing before him. Kuchi then teaches him a final lesson about the meaning of battle, and vanishes into the woods, never to be seen again. With that, the Battle of Tsushima ends in a Mongol victory. But by nightfall, the Mongols gather on their fleet, excluding Ryu and Ku, and listen to a speech by their marshal, who tells them they are heading for Kyushu. Edi, recalling Kuchi's face, hopes there are not many more like him there, because if there are, the Mongols are doomed. The next day, Teruhi wakes up covered head to toe in a ghillie suit. She removes it, recalls what happened, and walks through the woods until she spots Kuchi Jinzaburo standing on the cliff, admiring the view. When she starts crying, calling herself the only survivor, Kuchi tells her that surviving is winning and surprises her by revealing a few others he had saved earlier. At that, Teruhi breaks into tears of joy and says Tsushima is not over. Kuchi agrees and tells her they can still keep fighting to the end.